Ruth Hollister Kane, 75, retired attorney, mother of 3, grandmother of 6, was watering her garden on an ordinary Tuesday in April when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize, area code from a city she hadn't lived near in decades. Caller, Mrs. Hollister Kane? My name is Patricia Eulerin. I'm calling from the Medical Records Compliance Office at Riverview Memorial Hospital. I'm sorry to call out of the blue like this. I want to assure you this isn't a scam, and I'd encourage you to call the hospital's main line afterward to confirm my identity. We've recently completed a digitization project of records from the 1970s, and we discovered an irregularity in a file connected to your birth in 1975. Ruth sets down her watering can. Ruth, what kind of irregularity? Patricia, I want to be careful not to overstate anything until we've done proper verification. But the records from your date of birth show some inconsistencies in the identification of 2 infants born within hours of each other in our maternity ward. We're conducting outreach to the families involved. As a matter of both historical accuracy and current medical responsibility, would you be willing to come in for a conversation and possibly a DNA test so we can resolve this properly? Ruth's daughter, Annette, 48, a physician herself, takes the call seriously the moment she hears the details. Annette, mom, hospital record irregularities from that era usually mean exactly what you're afraid they mean. Identification bracelets in the 70s were not as rigorous as they are now. Babies were sometimes taken to nurseries together, returned by staff who occasionally relied on memory rather than triple-check tags. Ruth, you think I might not be who I think I am. Annette, I think it's worth finding out. Are you going to go? Ruth looks out at her garden, the home she has lived in for 31 years, the life she has built, the family she has always understood as entirely, completely hers. Ruth, I always thought it was strange that I didn't look like either of my parents. My mother used to say it, half joking. My whole childhood. I don't know where you came from. Ruthie, you don't look a thing like this family. I always assumed it was just one of those things families say. I never imagined it might be literal. Ruth, my mother, Eleanor Hollister, passed away 9 years ago. She said that phrase to me more times than I can count across 70 years. You don't look a thing like this family. Always with affection. Always as a joke about my dark hair and brown eyes against a family of fair-haired, blue-eyed Hollisters going back for generations in the photographs on our hallway wall. I remember, as a teenager, asking her once if she was sure I wasn't adopted. She laughed and said, "Don't be ridiculous. I was awake for the whole delivery. I watched them hand you to me." I believed her completely. I had never had a single reason not to. Sitting in my kitchen that evening, 58 years after that conversation, I found myself wondering for the first time in my life whether my mother had actually been watching closely enough in a hospital ward in 1975 to know for certain which baby was handed to which mother. Ruth drove the 2 hours to Riverview Memorial Hospital the following week, accompanied by Annette. Patricia Eulerin met them in a private conference room, along with the hospital's risk management council and a genetic counselor, brought in specifically for situations like this. 1. Patricia, I want to walk you through exactly what we found because I think the full context matters. During our digitization project, we discovered that to birth files from your date, yours and another infant's, had documentation inconsistencies. Specifically, the nursery log from that day shows a 30-minute window where both infants were recorded as being moved for routine checks, and the discharge paperwork for both families was processed by the same nurse within the same 10-minute period the following morning. Ruth, that sounds like it could be nothing, just sloppy paperwork. Patricia, it could be. That's exactly why we want to confirm with DNA testing rather than alarm anyone based on paperwork alone. I want to be transparent. This kind of discrepancy was, unfortunately, not as rare in that era as we would hope. Identification procedures have changed enormously since the 1970s, specifically because of situations like this. Ruth and Annette returned to the hospital for the results. The genetic counselor, Margaret Soto, sits across from them with a folder. Soto, Mrs. Hollister Kane. I want to deliver this clearly and give you space to respond however you need to. The DNA comparison between you and your raised parents' surviving relatives, we used your mother's sister, your aunt, as a comparison sample since both your parents have passed. Shows no biological relationship consistent with a parent-child or aunt-niece connection. I'm sorry. The hospital's concern was correct. You are not the biological child of Eleanor and Frank Hollister. Ruth sits very still. Annette takes her hand. Ruth, 75 years. I have been someone else's daughter for 75 years and never knew it. Soto, I want to gently push back on one word, if I may. You have been Eleanor and Frank's daughter for 75 years. In every way that the word means something, they raised you, loved you, shaped you. What we're discussing today is biology, not identity. Those are related but not identical things. Ruth nods, though her eyes are wet. Ruth, I understand the distinction intellectually. I'm not sure my heart has caught up yet. If Ruth was switched at birth, somewhere in the world was a woman who had spent 75 years living the life that should have been Ruth's biological inheritance, and Ruth had been living hers. The hospital's records pointed to one other infant born in that window, a baby girl named Teresa, born to Maria and Jose Garza, a young couple who had welcomed their daughter into a small apartment 2 hours from the hospital, with none of the resources the Hollister family had possessed. Patricia provides Ruth with the basic outreach summary, what the hospital has already learned in contacting Teresa Garza Lynn, who has also undergone DNA testing and received parallel confirmation. Patricia, Teresa Garza Lynn is, biologically, the daughter of Eleanor and Frank Hollister. She was raised by Maria and Jose Garza in circumstances quite different from your own. She worked in a garment factory from age 17, married young, raised 4 children, largely on a single income after her husband's injury limited his work. She's had, by her own description to our outreach coordinator, a hard but good life. Ruth absorbs this with visible difficulty. Ruth, she lived my biological family's life, but without any of what came with the Hollister name, the money, the schools, the opportunities my parents, the parents who raised me, were able to give me because of who they were. Patricia, that's an accurate way to think about it, yes. Ruth and I lived her biological family's circumstances, except I got the Garza biology and the Hollister upbringing. Patricia, also accurate. I recognize this is an enormous amount to process. Teresa has expressed interest in connecting, if you're open to it. She's also expressed considerable anxiety about how that conversation might go. Ruth, I sat with that anxiety. Patricia mentioned for a long time after I left the hospital, I tried to imagine what it must feel like from Teresa's side, discovering that the comfortable, wealthy life you might have had by pure biological right went instead to a stranger, while you spent 7 decades working factory floors and raising children on a single, uncertain income. I imagined that discovering this might produce something other than warmth. It might produce grief, resentment, a grief specifically shaped like, this should have been mine. I did not know, driving home that day, whether Teresa would want anything to do with me at all, or whether, if she did, it would be from love, or from something more complicated, a sense that the family that raised the real Garza daughter into wealth owed her something now. I decided, somewhere on that 2-hour drive, that I needed to meet her before I let my fears write the rest of the story for me. Before Ruth and Teresa ever spoke, two separate family reckonings were already underway in the Gaza family, fear that Ruth would see them as beneath her. In Ruth's own children, grief and anger that the grandparents they'd loved had, through no fault of their own, raised a child the hospital said wasn't really theirs. Teresa Garzalin, 75, sits with her adult children, Angela, 50, Marco, 47, and the two youngest, twins David and Daniel, 44, around her kitchen table. Angela, Mom, what if she looks at us and just sees, I don't know, people who got the short end? What if she feels sorry for us? Or worse, what if she feels nothing at all? Teresa, I've thought about that every day since the hospital called. I keep imagining her house. They told me she's a retired lawyer, lives in a big house, her kids all went to good colleges, and I think about our apartment growing up. Your father's hands after a full shift at the plant, how tight money was some years. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel about a life that could have been mine. Marco, are you angry, Mom? Teresa considers this honestly. Teresa, some days. Not at her, she didn't do this to us, she was a baby same as me. Some days I'm angry at a hospital 60 years ago, and a system that didn't catch a mistake that changed two entire lives. Other days I think about everything I did have, you four, your father, for 40 wonderful years before he passed. A life that was hard but was also mine, completely. Mine, built with my own hands. I don't know if I'd trade that even now, even knowing what I know. Ruth's son Michael, 45, struggles considerably more than Annette with the news. Michael, Mom, I don't understand why you want to meet these people at all. Grandma and Grandpa raised you. They're your real parents. This Teresa woman and her family are strangers who happen to share DNA with you. I don't see why that requires you to do anything. Ruth, Michael, I understand the impulse to protect what we've always understood as true. I feel it too. But there's a woman out there who has spent 75 years not knowing. Chance to meet me and ask whatever questions she needs to ask. Michael, and what about Grandma and Grandpa? Doesn't this feel like we're saying their whole life with you was somehow less real? Ruth, no, that's exactly what I don't want anyone to think. Nothing about meeting. Teresa's family subtracts one single day of what your grandparents gave me. I need you to understand that distinction, because I think it's the only way any of us get through this without losing something we don't need to lose. Ruth, I want to be honest about something I haven't said publicly very often. Part of my grief in all of this was about my parents, Eleanor and Frank, and whether they had ever suspected. The hospital's records suggested the mix-up was a genuine, undetected error, not a deliberate switch either family orchestrated. But I found myself, late at night, wondering, did my mother's joke, "You don't look a thing like this family," carry more weight than she ever let on? Did some part of her wonder and decide it was easier, kinder, safer to never investigate? I will never know the answer to that question. Both my parents are gone. I have chosen, deliberately, to believe the simplest explanation, that they loved the baby placed in their arms completely and uncomplicatedly, and never had reason to doubt it beyond an affectionate joke about appearances. I choose that belief not because I have proof, but because it is the version that lets me keep loving them without complication. I think, at 75, I am allowed to choose which truths I build my peace on. Ruth arranged the first meeting at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant roughly equidistant between her home and Teresa's, chosen specifically so that neither family would feel they were entering the other's territory on unequal footing. Ruth and Teresa see each other across the restaurant for the first time. Both women are visibly searching the other's face for something familiar, a shared feature. a recognizable trait, anything that might make the abstract fact of their swapped biology feel real. Ruth, Teresa. Teresa, Ruth. They sit. The early conversation is stiff, careful. Both women choosing words with visible deliberation. Teresa, I don't really know what to say to you. I've rehearsed about a dozen different conversations in my head and none of them feel right now that you're actually sitting across from me. Ruth, I've done the same thing. I think there isn't really a script for this. A long pause. Then Teresa says something that breaks through the careful surface. Teresa, can I just ask you something honestly? Do you feel sorry for me because I've been dreading that more than anything? I don't need anyone's pity. I had a good life, a hard one, but a good one. Ruth considers the question seriously rather than rushing to reassure. Ruth, I don't feel sorry for you, Teresa. I feel something more like grief for both of us. For the fact that a hospital's mistake meant neither of us got to live the life that was, in some cosmic sense, supposed to be biologically ours. But I don't think that means either life was wrong or less, or something to apologize for. You built something real with what you had, so did I. A second meeting, 2 weeks later, includes both families' adult children for the first time. It does not go smoothly immediately. Marco, Teresa's son, asks the question that has been sitting underneath the polite surface. Marco, I'll just say it. If the hospital had caught this 60 years ago, my mother would have grown up with the Hollister money. She would have gone to good schools instead of leaving school at 16 to help support the family. Doesn't anyone else feel like something was stolen here, even if no one meant to steal it? Silence around the table. Michael, Ruth's son, bristles. Michael, are you suggesting my mother owes your family something? Marco, I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm just saying the unfairness is real, even if it's nobody's fault. Ruth speaks before the tension can escalate further. Ruth, Marco's right that the unfairness is real. I'm not going to pretend it isn't, but I don't think the answer is to treat this as a debt anyone owes anyone. I think the answer is to ask, now that we know, what do we want to build together going forward? I can't undo 75 years. None of us can. But we can decide what the next chapter looks like. Later in that same dinner, Teresa's granddaughter, a quiet teenager named Lucia, approaches Ruth privately. Lucia, can I ask you something? Grandma Teresa always wanted to go to college. She talks about it sometimes, real quiet, like it still bothers her. Did you go? Ruth, I did. Law school, actually. Lucia, I want to go to college too. For nursing. But it's expensive and my parents are stretched thin already. Ruth looks at this girl, her biological grandniece, in the strange new mathematics of this family, and feels something settle in her, a sense of purpose forming. Ruth, Lucia, I'd like to talk more about that if you're open to it. Not as charity, as family. Helping family figure out a path. Would that be all right? Lucia's eyes well up. Lucia, yeah, that would be all right. Ruth, that conversation with Lucia was the moment I stopped thinking about this as two separate families forced into an awkward arrangement, and started thinking about it as one larger family that had simply been split apart by an accident 60 years ago, finally finding its way back to something like wholeness. 2 years after the hospital's first phone call, Ruth Hollister Kane and Teresa Garzalin had built something neither of them could have anticipated, a single, large, occasionally chaotic, blended family that gathered for holidays, supported each other's children and grandchildren, and had, in its own halting way, made peace with an accident that no one could have prevented and no one could undo. A Thanksgiving gathering at Ruth's house, both families present. 19 people in total, spanning for generations. Michael, who had resisted the connection most fiercely, is seen helping Marco carry folding chairs from the garage. The two of them talking easily about a fishing trip they're planning together. Lucide, now in her second year of nursing school with support from a fund Ruth established, sits beside Teresa, showing her photos from campus on her phone. Ruth, I want to be honest, it is not seamless. There are still moments of awkwardness, still occasional tension about money or history or who belongs where in this newly expanded family tree, but there is also real warmth, real connection, real love that has grown in soil none of us planted on purpose. I have come to believe that family is not only the people biology assigns you or the people circumstance hands you. It is also, sometimes, the people you choose to build something with once you know the truth. Ruth, drawing on her background as an attorney and her natural inclination toward documentation, begins writing about the experience, initially as a way of processing it herself, eventually as something larger. Her memoir, titled Both Mothers, Both Names, is published 18 months after the first hospital call. It chronicles both families' experiences, written with input and full collaboration from Teresa, who co-authors several chapters from her own perspective. IUTH at a book event, answering a question from the audience, people ask me if I wish the hospital had never called. I understand the question, but I don't have an honest answer that says yes. The call broke open something that needed breaking open, not because anyone did anything wrong intentionally, but because the truth, even difficult truth, tends to want to surface. Eventually, what we built after the call was harder than living with the comfortable lie would have been. It was also infinitely richer. Ruth's legal background and the book's public attention lead her toward advocacy work, partnering with patient rights organizations to push for stronger identification protocols and historical record review requirements at hospitals nationwide. She testifies before a state legislative committee considering a bill requiring hospitals to proactively audit historical maternity records during any digitization or modernization project, rather than simply digitizing potential errors without flagging them for affected families. Ruth, I was fortunate. Riverview Memorial chose transparency over liability concerns when they found my file. Many hospitals, facing the same discovery, choose silence, fearing lawsuits more than they value the right of families to know their own history. I am here today because I believe people deserve the truth about their own origins, even when that truth is complicated, even when it arrives 60 years later. The law should require what Riverview Memorial did voluntarily. The bill, which advocates begin informally calling Ruth's Law in state advocacy circles, passes the following year, requiring hospitals undergoing record digitization to flag and investigate identification discrepancies rather than simply archiving them silently. Ruth Hollister Kane is 78 now. She and Teresa Garzalin speak weekly. Their combined family, 19 people and growing, gathers for every major holiday, alternating between Ruth's house and Teresa's, a tradition both women insisted on as a way of honoring both halves of a single, complicated, beautiful inheritance. Lucia graduated nursing school last spring. Ruth attended the ceremony in the front row beside Teresa, both women crying for reasons that had stopped being about biology a long time ago. If this story found you, subscribe. Leave a comment if you discovered something like this about your own origins. Would you choose both families or would it feel impossible? And what does Ruth's phrase mean to you? That love doesn't work by subtraction? Both mothers. Both names, both true. We'll see you in the next one.